Good afternoon. I'm Scott Lee. I'm alcoholic.
Hey, Scott.
And welcome back, and thanks for coming back. And again, Nikki, thank you, and thank you everyone who made this possible for us. We appreciate the chance to share the gifts we've been given. I don't know how else to say it. Let's take a few moments and invite God to join us, and I'll just meet you back here. I think we wear some of these prayers out. But let's just take a moment and acknowledge the presence of deity. Amen. Thank you. I'm going to skip back a little ways. Page 35 asks one of the most important questions in the book. At the top, what sort of thinking dominates? What a powerful word, dominates the alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink. And it goes on for the rest of that page to describe a fellow named Jim, who at one time owned an automobile dealership. He lost it through drinking. He now works there as a salesman. And about 8 lines from the bottom, all went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. Kind of an interesting question. I take that to anybody who goes back out. I always ask them, tell me about your spiritual life for the 10 days before you went back out. What was your meeting count? What did morning prayer and meditation look like? What evening prayer and meditation? Were you sponsoring? Were you actually being sponsored? Let's look, because there's a hole. Let's fill that hole. That's an important thing. So turning the page, it says, yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. Please note the difference. What we asked was exactly what happened. What we got was his story. Jack Nicholson has a great line in the movie, As Good as It Gets. He says, I'll always give you some version of the truth. I love that. I think one of our people must have written that. So this is actually what I would call an after-action report. We're going to change it into a phone call. And Matt is going to play the part of Jim, and I'm going to be the hard-nosed sponsor who might have responded one at a time. We asked him exactly how it happened. This is his story.
I came to work on Tuesday morning.
What happened on Monday, Jim? A lot of people go to work on Monday. You might want to write that down. That'd be good information for you to have later. Please continue with your story.
I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned.
Irritated? How about bent? How about your blood pressure shoots up 40 points, your face turns red, you start developing this migraine headache, the veins in your neck stand out, and you cannot believe that you're having to work for this place that you used to own? Irritated? We call that minimizing. You can die from that, and that's something you do best. Please continue with your story.
I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious.
You had a fight with your boss and you don't think it was serious? I have a news flash for you, Jim. There are no unserious fights with bosses. That animal does not exist. You're minimizing again. I'm fascinated by your story. Please continue.
Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car.
Well, that's where they all are. It amazes me they spend that money to keep that showroom open when all the prospects are out in the country. Aren't they fortunate to have a genius like you working for them? Please continue with your story.
On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar.
Well, of course you did. I bet there's not a McDonald's within 5,000 miles of there. Why would you, as a newly sober alcoholic, not go to a place that has a bar? Of course you did. Good thinking, Jim. Please continue with your story.
Well, I had no intention of drinking.
Of course not.
I just thought I would
You
get
thought?
a sandwich.
I don't remember telling you to think. Your thinking is what got you into all of this mess. Please continue with your thought.
I also had the notion that I might...
Finish that sentence.
Let's see. I thought.
You shouldn't have.
I know, that's right. I thought I would get a sandwich.
Oh, is that what you thought?
Yeah.
I see.
I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place.
Well, that's where they all are. I bet there's 100 car salesmen in the parking lot waiting for you to come out so they can come in and prospect in that bar. That's where all the guys that buy cars are hanging out, is in the bar. Really glad that they got you. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Well, this place was familiar. It was familiar for, and I've been going to it for years.
Wait a minute. Didn't we talk about not going back to your old playmates and playgrounds? And this is a bar you've been going to, and now you're going back in there? I'm glad you brought this up. It's something important for us to talk about. Please continue with your story.
I had eaten there many times during the months I was sober.
You didn't tell me about it.
I sat down at the table and I ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking.
Of course not.
I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk.
Great, let's overdose on something else. Go ahead.
Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind.
Another thought? Oh, good. Let's hear this thought.
Well, it crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach.
That's your kind of thinking. We have a term for that. We call it alkalogic. And you're about as good-witted as anybody I've ever seen. Skip down to the last paragraph.
Thus, he started one more journey to the asylum for Jim.
Yeah. In those days, that's what they did with us. Ebby Thatcher was about to be put in an insane asylum when a couple of guys came and literally saved him from the judge. This guy goes to the insane asylum when he drinks. Now, I want to forgive the Hollywood. I think it's kind of fun. And I think it puts some energy in the room, which is something we need right after lunch. I want to ask you to do something. Scan that page 36 and look how often you see the single letter word I. Recovery is a team sport. He lost the first word in the first step, we. The only we on the page is when we asked him exactly what happened. We didn't even get that. We got his story. Wow. Team sport. Get with the we. Tell your sponsor what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to pick it up on step whatever? What? 8.
Step 8?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. We've also still got room in the basket. If somebody else has a question, you can fill it out here. You can put it into the computer here.
After completing step 7, we need more action.
You're on page 75?
76.
76.
Without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we had harmed and whom we were willing to make amends. Remember, we started this list back on page 67 at the end of the last full paragraph. We've added to it, to the people whom we've harmed. We subjected ourselves to drastic self-appraisal. Now we get to go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any length for victory over alcohol. And before getting into 9, I am going to recount the way that I've been taken through. Now, coming out of step 4, I have a list of people. Hopefully I didn't burn it after step 5. And I added to it. This is a separate sheet of paper, not my inventory. I started a brand new clean sheet of paper, and I have a list of names of people whom I hurt. Key component of this step is to take that list of people whom I've hurt and sit with my sponsor prior to making amends. And this is the step 8, my step 8 experience. I get to look at the harm. What did I do to hurt this individual? Sometimes I think I've hurt an individual, place, or institution, when in fact I've unintentionally, they've been an unintended bystander, or they don't necessarily need a direct amends. So for me, it was very important to have sponsorship, to be able to go through each name on my harms list. Like, I do not need to go back to the drug dealer. Probably not a good idea. That's my sponsorship advice. You may have a different sponsor, but for me, that doesn't equate with what we're trying to do here. I am willing to go to any lengths, but let's not set ourselves up for failure. It's also important to know that there are going to be sometimes situations where now is not the opportune time to make that amends. So the exercise that I went through with my sponsor and that I take the guys through is to go through each list, that I have them tell me what it was, that they did to hurt this individual. And if we basically answer in 3 ways: now, later, or never. And now means now, that we should prepare and consider making direct amends as soon as possible, scheduling a meeting with that individual for step 9. Later means maybe now's not the right time. Let's continue to pray about it. Never means never, like some of those situations that we just have no business going back to the wreckage of the past to save ourselves and potentially hurt somebody else. This was really an important part for me to align myself with what we're doing in step 9 prior to going into it, because I had gotten the spark underneath me a couple times, and I wanted to go out and tell everybody I was sorry. Probably had a couple times, but here, by the time I got to step 9, everybody knew I was sorry. I was a sorry sack of excuses and apologies. It doesn't hold any weight. So it's essential for me to gather this list and to pause prior to going into step 9 and starting to make direct amends. What helped me make direct amends in person first was looking at the directions for making amends and in writing out my amends in letter form. Because again, this isn't a monologue of me, woe is me, I'm a horrible person, blah, 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 blah. It's very precise in what I'm trying to do. And simply, like it says on the bottom of page 77, tell them that I'm never going to get over my drinking until I've done my utmost to straighten out the past. My goal there is not to gain their forgiveness. My goal there is to present the facts that I have harmed this individual and center what I'm saying on my disease and not on you did this. And actually I've been suggested not to use the word you in my amends, that it has nothing to do with that other person. It is about what I've done. And so I was very reluctant to go into step 9, and I think I share that sentiment with a lot of other people. But there has been an immense amount of freedom going through it. When did you want to touch on 8 or 9 first? Or?
Just a couple of things. Yeah, thank you. Amends requires adult supervision. And it was pointed out to me that they numbered these steps so geniuses like Scott didn't try to take them out of order. Don't be skipping around. There are 2 things necessary to make an effective amend. One is to do the first 8 steps with a sponsor, and the other is to have a sponsor coach you on how to do 9. My own perspective on that is it's really important for me not to sit down with them and tell them everything I did that harmed them. I need to make an appointment with them, let them know that's what I'm coming for. Here's my amends to my mother. I wasn't as good a son to you as I could have been. I know I broke your heart. I'm living a better life today, and I think I've done some damage. I'd like to repair it. Can you tell me how? The end. The end. The longer I talk, the better chance I'm going to throw an excuse for myself and take away all the power from the other person. I tell the guys I sponsor, I don't want you to take the 4th breath when you're making amends. If they need to talk about it, I need to listen. But I do not need to do a lecture course here because I'm going to screw that up every time. It's a special gift that I have. So I think the only thing really necessary to make amends is the willingness to do so. My friend Bob Darrell, if you don't know that name, get one of his talks. He says, if you'll bring the willingness to make the amends, God will rearrange the universe to make it possible. And it just happens. It just happens. It just becomes possible. A couple of things I hear that trouble me. People say my amends to my children will never be complete. That's not true. I went to my children. I have a boy and a girl. One at a time, very direct. We talked about it. I told them why I was there. They understood. I asked for their forgiveness. They gave it. Today, I'm trying to be the best father I can be. It isn't 9th step work, it's 12th. Spiritually awakened men who have children try to be good fathers. And if I think it's step 9, I have not accepted their forgiveness or God's or my own, and I have work to do. Come on down off the cross. You can complete your 9th step if you just will. And I think it's a really, really important thing. I talked about, well, I'll catch that here in a couple of minutes. I think the 2 most important things I've done in my life are the forgiveness process in step 4 we talked about, and this part. Because if that prayer is true, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive, I also cannot afford for my soul to stand naked before my Creator, guilty of having harmed one of his other children that left them with a resentment that's blocking them from his sunlight. And I'm going to have to at least be able to point at a place in my life where I tried to fix it. I don't have to get it fixed. I'm going to have to be able to say, well, this is where I tried to fix it. I made a real effort. I think it's a critically important piece. There's another piece, too, and this is a gift from my second wife, Miss Linda. Some of you know her. She calls it good amends. And this is at another time. I'm aware of my sins of commission. I'm pretty much aware of the things I did that hurt you. What I missed are the things I didn't do that hurt you. And so I went back, and she said, to whom do you owe thanks? Who didn't you thank that deserved to be thanked? I went back to my first instructor pilot, who saw that I was one of the gifted ones, and he wouldn't let me. I could have coasted through all of it. He wouldn't let me. He worked me like a borrowed mule. He would not let me coast. He set up my Air Force career. I never finished lower than second in anything flying the whole time I was in the Air Force because of what he did for me, my first instructor. I went back and thanked him for that. I went back and thanked my major professor in college. I'd have never graduated without that man. I told him that. And at a different time, much, much later, I went back to my mother, and I thanked her for being a great mom. And I thanked her for all the freedom I got, for all I learned, from all her sacrifice. I was profuse in my thanks. And I went home and I wrote that out in a letter, and I mailed it to her. My mother died in a nursing home of Alzheimer's, and she didn't have much left. She had that letter, and I would ask you, who didn't you thank? Or who didn't you thank profusely as they deserved? It's a phenomenal experience. It's an absolutely amazing experience. If we have time, I'll tell some of the other specific amends stories of experiences. There are 5 prayers in the reading here on steps 8 and 9, and they all are for willingness. They're all for willingness. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Top of page 78, as I was touching on, as we discussed, his fault or not discussed, we stick to our own. This is making the amends now. I'm getting ready to make the actual approach. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we'll be gratified with the results. And I had a situation. Like I said, I'd burned a lot of bridges, and my dad's business partner had gotten some of the heat from me working for their company, and I'd owed him amends. It was determined that I needed to make amends, and he was in the city where I was currently living, so I scheduled up a meeting and had him come and visit. He knew that we needed to talk, but I don't know if he knew exactly what we were going to be discussing. I brought it up, and he listened. And I followed the directions just like, are outlined in the book. And I said, I wasn't the best employee, and I did some things that were wrong. I need to know what I can do right now in this current situation to make things right. And he kind of laughed a bit, and he's like, I wasn't really upset, but now that you mention it, it really kind of pissed me off, and so we started to have this experience right before my eyes, and he gave me my marching orders moving forward, and I guess the seed is planted. And three years later, I get a call from him, and he's a good family friend still to this day, and he was choked up noticeably, like something that was bothering him, and he said that he hadn't been able to stop drinking for a while, and he needed to know how to get in touch with Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was able to get him in touch and get him plugged in the state that he lived, and still sober to this day. But you know, and I don't take credit for him being sober today, but I think it says here 9 cases out of 10 the unexpected happens, and that's exactly what happens. We don't know the outcomes, thank God. But if I suit up and I show up and I do the work outlined here in the book, you know, I get to be a big book to somebody. I get to live by these spiritual principles, and now there's like this collateral, or this extended the benefit. And a few years ago, my dad had passed, like, you know, in 2010. But when I was still drinking and ripping and roaring, he had found fly fishing and really liked to fly fish, and he had tried to get me to go with him, but I never would, because I was always had something else to do. You know, it's just like kind of been blocking my plans, and I felt bad about that. You know, when he passed, you know, this was something that he loved to do, and I never took him up on it. But I got to go. My family friend invited me to go to Alaska a few years ago, and we went up there and fly fished, and I got to bring some of my dad's remains with us, and we like had this really beautiful moment and released some of his ashes. And you know, I think what does that have to do with Alcoholics Anonymous? I think it has everything to do with the process of reconciliation and making amends, because an amends isn't an I'm sorry. It is I'm a different person today, and as a result, you know, I get to have this new life and get to have relationships with people that I had cut off. And yet, I'm just cleaning off my side of the street. I don't get to control the outcomes. It's the same principles that we're applying in these other areas. I have to bring God into it. From the start, I pray in and I pray out before making these amends. And like I said, I was in a facility where I wasn't able to see everybody on my list face to face. My mom wasn't going to come and visit, and so I took an opportunity to write her a letter. My sponsor suggested it, and I wrote her a letter just using the verbiage out of the book. And I was just like, Mom, like Scott said, you know, I wasn't the best son. I need to know what I can do right now to make it right. And her response came back, and it was a shock to me. I mean, I'd done everything besides physically hurt this woman. And she said, Matt, the only thing that we want from you is for you to love yourself like we've loved you this whole time. And like $5,000 would have been much easier to handle at that time, you know. I would have been, but that was so on point for where I was. I hadn't have the capacity to truly take care of myself until I came to you, broken, and you guys have shown me how and to do that. And this is part of that process. But that response also taught me a lot about and deepened my relationship with the power, you know, who I call God, is because I think that's God's marching assignments for me too. You know, hey kid, you know, I just want you to love yourself like I've loved you this whole time. And my world got a lot bigger that day. And that's one other thing I want to get in before I pass it back over to you, is that, you know, at 23 years old, the idea of not drinking for the rest of my life sounded like a death sentence. Like, I'd much rather you just take me out back, put one in the back, you know, put one in my head, let me just die. That would have been the easier, softer way, truly. Thank God I gave this thing a shot, and I thought my life was over. Thank God it was. That life was over. And as a result of taking the steps and taking these actions that I didn't believe in, my world continues to get bigger and bigger. And now, like, I can go back home. And now I can go over to the family friend's house, and I don't have to avoid that side of town. And now I pay the restitution back to that city and to that state, so I can go in and out across those state lines a free man. And I paid all my restitution. Now I can travel the world a free man. And that's the fruits of doing the work. You know, I'm only going to be as paralyzed as my the wreckage of my past and those things, those defects that are continually inside of me that I'm not willing to bring forward and to turn, towards the power who has my best interest in mind. So it is not always easy to go and face the wreckage of the past, but it's been the way to have a lot of these incredible experiences. And then the key is not, after having completed my 8-step list, not having any amends, it's to keep the slate clean. And I can do that in the 10th step on a daily basis. But I'm truly grateful, and I have several other stories which I won't go into, but just the power of doing the work, of getting into this 8-step and 9-step with a sponsor supervision. I like that reminder, and clearing away the wreckage, because my world gets bigger each time I do.
Thank you. Yeah, I talked in step 4, the forgiveness process, about how I become emotionally disconnected from your mistakes in the past. Step 9 disconnects me emotionally from my mistakes in the past. I still have those memories, but they're now just facts. It's an important piece. Got a couple of real specific things I'm going to talk about. A lady friend of mine in another state shared this with me. She was sponsoring a lady who had sold herself, and she had a tremendous amount of shame about having prostituted herself. And this is what they came up with. She sat down and figured out how much money she'd made doing that. And she donated that amount of money to Magdalene House and some other similar charities. And what she said was, I sold my self-esteem. I am buying it back. It's a powerful thing. I share in that every time I get a chance. That is such an important piece. Matt talked about not using the word sorry. I forbid him and I sponsor to use the word sorry in making an amend. Nobody believes that. We wore sorry out 20 years ago. Nobody believes that anymore. I was wrong. I believe I harmed you. I'm ashamed. Or a combination of those three. Great way to go. Sorry, They don't believe that anymore. Another tricky one too, gentlemen, and I do this as best I can. If someone has a suggestion, I can't tell you how open I am to it. Another sponsee in my mind and I were doing this workshop up in Canada a couple of years ago, and a couple of ladies brought this one to us. So the question is, how do I make amends to a lady whose charms I've availed myself of lightly? Right? Like I didn't even call the next day kind of thing. How do I make amends for that without making her feel cheap? Pretty dadgum good question. The first piece is, I don't make the contact. I have a lady from my home group make the contact, because I don't want her to have to answer to her new husband, who was that guy on the phone and what did he want. So I can't do any damage that way. She calls up and says, I'm friends with this guy named Scott, and he's an AA, and he believes he's harmed you, and he'd like to make amends. Are you willing? If she says no, we're done here. If she says yes, you want an email, do you want a letter, do you want a phone call, do you want it in person? We're going to do it her way. And here are the words. 1, I wasn't as good a friend to you as I could have been. 2, I disrespected you, and I'm ashamed of it. And I believe I've harmed you, and I'd like to make it right. Can you tell me how? The end. The end. And now I got to listen. If somebody's got something better than that, I'd love to hear it. But we found that to be very, very powerful. And I have permission to tell the stories I tell, by the way. I think it's important that you know that. One of the fellows I sponsor, he was living, when he got sober, he was living in a borrowed car. It was convertible and it had a leak. And he had just gotten his head far enough above water where he's in an efficiency apartment. And he comes home to his answering machine. You young kids can ask somebody what an answering machine is. Comes home to this answering machine, and there's this voicemail on it. And it says, Mr. So-and-so, this is Agent Smith from the Internal Revenue Service. You have an appointment in my office Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, 1010 Church Street, Suite 400. And if that's in conflict with your schedule, I'd like to suggest you change your schedule. And he walked in there, and they hit him with a bill for $167,000 back taxes. And he came to me and said, what should I do? I mean, he's a little bit thin on $167,000. And I said, gather the paperwork they've asked for. You want God to be real in your life, treat him like he's real. Let me tell you what that means. When you go back over there for that next appointment, in morning prayer and meditation, you ask God to go with you. Hold the door for him. Go down to the car and open the passenger door. Move the junk. Ask him to get in. Drive in a manner that neither endangers nor enrages any of his other children. Get where you're going, park, get out, walk around, open the door. Ask him to go in with you. He said when he walked into the agent's office that next time, there were 2 chairs on his side of the desk. And he knew he was going to win. And 6 months later, they wrote him a check for $1,200. Don't doubt the power here. I could tell these stories all day. One of my favorites, a guy I sponsored, in the schoolyard in about the 3rd grade, one day grabs another kid's stocking cap, and it's just gone. Nobody knows this. Boom, it's gone. When no one's looking, he flings it up in a tree and disappears. And he never comes clean about the hat. The kids from a poor family goes through that winter without a hat. Here we are 30 years later. He doesn't know the kid's name. The school's no longer there. Clearly, there's no way he can make amends. Don't you ever believe it. And we sit prayerfully. And the next day, all the kids at the National Orphanage got Tennessee Titans stocking caps. And he got free. A way will be shown. All you have to do is bring the willingness. That's all you have to bring. One of my favorite stories, and I heard this one from a friend I've already mentioned. This guy used to rob houses. He said, you know where they are? I said, yeah, well, go start knocking on the doors. He says, I could go to prison. He said, that's right. How free do you want to be? How long do you think you can walk around? So he knocks on this particular door, and this little lady answers, and he says, did you live here on thus and such a date? She said, yes, I did. And he said, your home was burglarized. She said, that's correct. He said, I'm the burglar, and I'm here to try to make it right. She said, please come in. She called her husband, and they walked through the house. They said, you know, how about this? He said, I pawned it. And how about this? And she said, there was a painting up here, an oil painting of a woman, and they cut a big X in it. Why did you do that? And he said, I thought there might be a safe behind that painting, and I couldn't get it off of the wall. And she said, your amends are complete. We'll never be able to thank you enough. Our son hated the woman in that painting, and we thought he had done that, and we've thrown him out of the family. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing when you reach out to these things. Page 83. Halfway down. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them. We honestly said ourselves we'd write them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. I've been in the hands of big book people since my early days. We were laughing about it earlier. I've been the victim of great sponsorship. And I get to step 5, and I admit that I paid for an abortion. And that was the heaviest thing on me. That was absolutely, and if you've done that and you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. I'm not here to indict you. But I wouldn't pick this scab if I didn't have the medicine. And I was sat down and handed a plain white piece of paper and a pen. I said, can you see that child? No. Well, write him a letter. And I wrote that child an amends letter. And when I finished, and my experience has been that letter is not so much about writing it is about tears. And I cried long and hard through that thing. And I'm pretty sure I was through until I got to the end. I was told to sign it, Love, Dad. I had one more good cry in me. I folded that. I was handed a plain white envelope. And I said, address the envelope. I said, how? Where's that child? With God, right. Where is that? In heaven. Correct. Address the envelope. And I addressed the envelope to an unborn child in heaven. And I was told to put extra postage on it. It's a long way from Nashville. And I mailed it, and I got free. Several years later, in my lineage, we do not hear fifth steps. We exchange them. I think I've already demonstrated that. One of the men I sponsor called me, and he said, I sponsor a guy who's got the abortion thing, and I've never done that. Would you sit with him while he writes his letter? Because I don't have the experience. I said, you know I will. When we finished and I handed him the envelope, he said, no. He said, I think I want to burn this, not in the sense of destroying it, but to send it in smoke. I said, you bet. We went out in the backyard, and he turned it to ash and crumbled it and put them on the roses, and he got free. And I don't have his permission to tell you that. He begged me to tell you because he got free. And I don't care what you've done. I serve a God that's bigger than all of that. And it is really that simple. I've had the privilege of working with a tremendous number of people who needed to make amends to somebody who's already gone to the other side. And I've seen them continuously get well. Now, if you can't cry, I want to recommend you need to learn to cry. And I'll be glad to teach you. I'll put my email address up here. This guy taught me, and I'll be glad to teach you. It's a one-page Word document. I'll be thrilled to send it to you. It's all over the internet. I wrote that 30 years ago when the guy taught me to cry. The tears washed the windows of my soul. That's what they're for. And I got free. And if that's the one that's eating you up, let's talk. I know where the medicine is. It's been an important thing for me. One of the things I do when I get a sponsee to step 8 is I start him sponsoring. I asked Don Pritz one time, what's a sponsor's primary responsibility? And he says, not allow the sponsee to settle for relief, but get him all the way to recovery. By the time he finishes step 7, his life has changed. He's got a job. He's been promoted. He brings the entire paycheck home. He knows where all the dents in the car came from. His key fits in the front door. When he walks in, they don't scatter. His phone rings, that's a miracle. He answers, it's another miracle. He's sleeping in the big bed again. Now, he may not have crossover privileges, but he's back in the big bed. His life has changed, and his motivation has waned. And my job is to not let him settle for relief, which is what he's gotten, but to get him all the way to recovery. So there are a couple of things that I do when I get him to step 8. One is it's time for him to start sponsoring. He's got message now. He's got plenty of message now. We're going to find him a rookie. And we're going to get that rookie's blanket permission for my sponsee to tell me everything about him. And I will coach my sponsee through coaching his sponsee through this work. I'll do that as many times as we need to maintain the integrity of the message. It's not going to take him long to figure out he does not want his sponsee to get to step 8 before he finishes 9. It helps me keep him moving. The other thing is I have him schedule it. Because he's going to look at us and say, I can't make 60 amends, and he can't. He can make 1 tomorrow, and we're only 60 days away from finishing this. So let's start scheduling these things. I find that really helps a lot to get them started and keep them started by simply doing a schedule. And keep it on the front burner. Keep it on the front burner. Don't let it back away. Another thing that's really important is the person receiving the amend is not final authority in the amend. They're not. My sponsee and I are prayerfully. I used to sponsor Big Ken Sweeney, and Big Ken said that before he got sober, he hated everybody and he wished there was more of them. And if somebody had come to him to make amends before he got sober, and they would have allowed it, he'd have bashed them for the rest of their lives. We need to hear what this person thinks the amends should be, but they are not final authority. So we're not asking you to turn your will and life over to somebody who may be in love with hating you. That's not the package here. That's not it. And I think this is a really important little detail. I'm probably missing some stuff. What do you got?
Yeah. This is a one not to miss, and one also too that I've had on people on my list that weren't immediately available. Like I had said, be it my current location or just I wasn't able to find them and track them down. But I think the most important piece that you've highlighted on so far is just willingness. Am I willing, if given the opportunity, to approach this individual and to set things right, and then leave the results up to God. There is only so much that I can do in my power, but if I'm willing to do the footwork, God is willing, has always done the heavy lifting for me.
I missed a piece on the crying too. Gentlemen, I need to warn you, please. If you start crying at appropriate times and places, you're going to attract a lot of women. Do not call me and complain about this, because I warned you at the gate, okay? Because they're sick of that John Wayne act you're doing, and they see right through it, don't you, ladies? Yeah, they're not buying that garbage. They see a guy in touch with his emotions, it lights them up, trust me. We're going to change the subject now. Move on to 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, we still got paper left. We're going to do questions and dumb looks. I don't want to promise answers. We might not have them dumb looks. We got
that.
Yeah, we'll do it at the next break. Yeah, why don't you go ahead on 10?
Okay. Step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Wow. And it also says that we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, not if, but when they crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. And this step helps me to stay in the here and the now. Stay in the present, between the claps, as Scott was saying. And I'm slowly starting to see, by the time I'm making my amend, I haven't even gotten through all of my 9-step amends, I'm starting to notice changes around me. The way that I'm responding to life is different. One situation, I had a piece of mail at the mail room, and I was expecting some money to come in, and the mail lady said that it wasn't addressed properly. And this really disturbed me. And I went up to the mailroom and I was like, what's going on here? And she told me, oh, well, they're supposed to sign here, and they signed here instead. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And then I saw her reach for her radio, and I kind of calmed it down a little bit, and I just stormed off there, mumbling, blah, 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 blah. And I went back down to where I was living, and I knew that the way that I handled that situation was not my best. So without even thinking about it, I tail between the legs, walked back up to the mailroom and said, I could have handled that situation better. And I promptly set things right. I'm still driven by, those pre-emergence of self that we talk about in step 4, the selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. They're still there. Hopefully they're not as loud as they have been, up to this point, because I'm aware of them. But how do I respond when they crop up? That's the key. For me, there's nothing more humbling than when I catch myself in the middle of acting out, being just like saying, wait, I'm wrong. Like, oh, that's just like, even saying that right now just makes me kind of like queasy. But just, you know what, I'm wrong. Just right there, stop it. Or what's even harder, and I learned to do this early in recovery, is like, look, I just lied. If you tell somebody a lie and then you look at them and invite, like, I just lied to you, 2 things happen. 1, they look at you like a deer in headlights, like, because that's just not normal. But 2, it's very difficult to lie again to that person, especially. And it becomes increasingly more difficult to lie in general, because I don't like telling people I lie. That's just a very awkward and uncomfortable situation. So this is like, this is where I see my recovery on a daily basis. I'm starting to experience the fruits of the steps without even realizing it. And it's about staying in the present. It's about giving myself a little bit of grace, giving myself some time before responding, to just take a breath. Somebody cuts me off or says something like, okay, do I need to respond to this situation? Sometimes the best thing I can do is just walk away, or like say, okay, thanks for that information, and just keep walking. Incredible tools for living. And then it gives me this, again, a common theme that's been running through. I resolutely turn my thoughts to somebody else. When I'm not getting my way, I can just pick up the phone and call you. One of the exercises that my sponsor had me do when we were in this step the first time was to try and envision myself in the third person, as if, like, I was looking at myself from the sky, and to observe my actions. How am I interacting with other people? How am I interacting? How am I driving? What am I doing? And in that way, I can kind of get a sense of my present moment. What are my relationships like? It says that sanity has returned by this point, which is fantastic news. Having been self-prescribed insane at step 2, at this point in time, the quench for liquor or drink as a solution has gone. I'm not thirsty anymore.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Thank you.
Run with that.
Yeah.
I'll jump back.
Yeah, just a couple of things real quick on step 10. Step 10 is about being present in my own life, moment by moment. I think there's a slogan that applies, and it's easy does it. I run Mach 2 with my hair on fire. I don't even know I've screwed up. Step 11 is a morning inventory and an evening inventory, and step 10 kind of lies in between. It's about being present in my own life. And it says, love and tolerance of others is our code. For the earthlings, it's just love. For us, they had to throw in tolerance. And I got a great lesson on that. There was a guy, I'm going to refer to him as Edward. Well, that's what he said his name was. It's the right thing. And he was in my home group, and everything he did bothered me. I did not like the way the man drank his coffee. And he was chairing the meeting one time, and I was sitting there hating him, and I heard my sponsor's voice in the back of my head saying, if you spot it, you got it. And what Edward was doing, he wasn't chairing the meeting, he was moderating. He talked after everyone. I was sitting there hating that when I realized, holy mackerel, I've done that. I haven't done it since. And so I started following Edward around, and every time he did something that bothered me, I searched myself and I found it. Edward became one of my greatest teachers. Now, he had all of my character defects. He had them much worse than I did. I must tell you the whole truth. Yeah, and I learned, so if I have to tolerate somebody, better keep an eye on it. They may have a lesson for me. There's a wonderful line over here on page 85, too. It says, we really have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. It's not contingent on my spiritual condition. I don't know what that is. Contingent on the maintenance of it. That's what the evening half of step 11 is about. It's for me to check and see what my maintenance was on my spiritual condition today. I have no idea what my spiritual condition is, and I'm not qualified to judge it. It's like spiritual growth. It's not something I do, it's something I receive. The maintenance, I got control of that, and I'd better keep an eye on it. Yeah. I thought I had something else on here, and I don't. Oh, yeah, the next sentence. The assumption here is that you've done the first 9 steps as thoroughly as you can. And it says, every day is the day we must carry the vision of God's will in all of our activities. That's my program today. Every day. I get no days off. The vision, best I can see, God's will, what would he have me do next in all of my activities. There it is, in a single sentence. I've got a note here on this one. I don't know why it's here. I also do not allow the men I sponsor to give their phone numbers to new men. It's a waste of time. The new guy can't call you. We exchange phone numbers with new men, and we take responsibility for calling that new guy twice in the next 3 days. I lay that on the men I sponsor as a standing requirement, and I have it myself too. There's nothing for me to pick up the phone, say, hey, new guy, We met last night at the ABC meeting. We traded numbers, told him I was going to call. I talk to 5 men in recovery every day. You're on today's list. How you doing? I'm going to the XYZ meeting tonight. Why don't you meet me there? I got some people you might like to meet. It's nothing for me to call him. He can't call me. And somebody tells me they can't get sponsees. You start doing that a month from now, you won't be able to swat them. Believe me, you won't. Stop giving your phone number to new people. Start exchanging and calling them. Their life depends on it. And so does mine. So does mine. You want to start on 11?
Yeah. That's good stuff. Step 11. Well, there's a lot here.
Yeah. Oh, we got 10 whole minutes.
10 minutes to get through 11? All right, perfect. Start with 5 minutes, and then you can build up to 10. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. Well, that's true. I was kind of reluctant to, as soon as I read step 11, the one thing that I hear and see is meditation, and that, of course, is foreign to me, and I think of Eastern religions and, levitating and ohms and things of this nature, and I'm really glad that I had a sponsor that was just like, Matt, just don't think. Just don't think. Doesn't it, like, we identified in step 1 that you fired yourself from management, and it doesn't say anywhere, at least in the first 86 pages that we've read, that you get to manage your life. You don't get to manage, and so let's just get out of that business, and let's look at these instructions. And we have great. I think the 12 and 12 also has a great selection and great exposition on the step 11. But on page 86, and talking about having the right attitude, in providing a definite and valuable suggestion. That's what I needed. I needed suggestions, and I still need them today. I love the guided meditations using like different apps. I've just respond better to having either reading a passage and thinking about it, or listening to it, or listening to somebody else kind of go through the process of a guided meditation. Scott has a couple great ones too. We get a series of questions when we retire at night at the top of 86, and then on awakening at the bottom of 86. And when I first started working on 11, that was the extent of my practice. I would have these questions written out on a card, and I would go through them each night and upon awakening each morning. As I've gone on, and I still do this, I don't actually have to read the book. I kind of go through in my head, and I'll admit here on the record that I don't answer each in front of my sponsor too at that. But in a general way, what I like to bookend my day with a reflection on the past 18 hours, on what I do. And I go through chronologically, and I go through, see where I was, if I was selfish at all, if I was dishonest, do I own amends, what was I able to do, like what were some good things that I was able to do, where I was able to pack joy into the stream of life, and was there something that I could have done better? And then at the end of that, I'll follow it up with the 7-step prayer, and I love that because it asks God to take both good and bad. Leave nothing else except for my willingness, and of what it would bore to my usefulness to others. And I'll close out my day in that way, so that when I wake up tomorrow, it's a fresh slate. I can close the day. I need to have that so that I can wake up, and upon awakening, I can consider the 24 hours ahead. That has been working for me here for the last few years, and it's a way. And sometimes there are some things that I need to clean up. I'm not gonna be able to do that at 10 or 11 o'clock at night whenever I go to sleep. I'll put it on the list first thing in the morning. God gave us brains to use, and I love that as I continue to practice this, that buffer between me not getting my way and my response to it gets a little bit bigger, a little bit wider, and a little more cushy. And as a result of the benefits of this prayer meditation, I'm not like so tense all the time. I mean, there are some things that really upset me, but it seems like it's just like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then when I do find myself being more agitated and saying things that I don't necessarily mean and having to make amends in step 10, it's because I'm lacking in this area. But it's a continued practice. It is a continued practice on the 11th step. I saved you 3 minutes.
That's about all I need.
Perfect.
We talk a lot about doing the next right thing. There's a last right thing. The last right thing is to go to bed at a reasonable hour and set an alarm. For me, I set 2 alarms so that I can get a full night's rest and awaken tomorrow morning with plenty of time to start my day on a spiritual basis. Don't do the last right thing tonight, can't do the first right thing tomorrow. When I don't have time for morning prayer and meditation, the problem isn't in the morning, the problem is the night before. I set my alarms 31 minutes apart. When the first one sounds, quick trip to the bathroom, hit the start button on the coffee pot. It's set up, I just hit the start button. Spend the next 30 minutes in prayer and meditation. I send love. I packed this room with love this morning. I packed it full. Those are just the things that I do. I invite God in to run my life. I ask him to bless me. I don't judge anybody or any situations, that I be a great listener and a great giver. If he has lessons for me, I like to learn them, doing as little damage as possible. I quit praying for guidance over 30 years ago. When I pray for guidance, I'm giving God his instructions. Big fella, take a knee. Let's go with the guidance already. It doesn't work. What I pray is that I don't miss any of his guidance. I think a loving God sends it every day. All the blocks in the channel between me and God are at my end. His end is clear. Bless me, I don't miss any of your guidance today. Bless me, I don't miss any chances to be of service, to spread love and joy. I ask him every day for humility. He has used me to touch a number of lives. I got to keep an eye on it. I have an alter ego I call Saint Scott of the microphone. Very ugly fellow. I also pray for faith. Might have enough to share with everybody that I see. Those are just some of the things that I do. I was sober 6 years, and my first wife was screaming at me one more time. And I got this moment of clarity. And the moment of clarity said, I'm just before punching her in the face. And when she goes down, I'm going with her. She's on the way to the hospital, I'm on the way to the jail. It's a bad plan. I worked it out all by myself. And it's a good thing there wasn't anybody else there. And I walked away and started looking for the part. 48 hours later, I moved because it was imminent. She was not going to quit that. And the day was going to come where I wasn't going to be able to stand it, and I was going to have to hurt her. And I didn't want to do that. So I went to Old Timer. I said, what should I do? They said, turn it over. I said, how? Nobody could tell me. Believe what you like. I believe what I'm about to tell you. I went to the source. I got 2 things. First one is, what is it I turn over? And the answer is the result. How do I do that? 2 pieces. 1, I stand today where God is. 2, I pray within his principle. We already talked about that. But the other thing I got was 3 prayers. And here they are. Prayer number 1, God, if it's your will for us to be together, put us together. Prayer number 2, if it's your will for us to be apart, put us apart. Those are the easy ones. Here's the big one. God, if it's your will for me not to know today, leave me not knowing. That's the one. That's the one. When I can pray that one and mean it, I can have my sponsor's definition of serenity. Serenity is not freedom from the storm. Serenity is peace in the middle of the storm. The only way to have that is give up my need to manage the storm. The only way to do that is to know the manager of all storms. If he doesn't want me to know today, I don't want to know. I always thought it was not knowing made me crazy. It was needing to know. We already talked about that. And in that particular case, I prayed that prayer every day for 10 months. And then one morning I knew. Guidance tends to come right on time. It is rarely early. I think Matt already talked about that. Touch one more piece and we'll go to break. It says, on awakening, I'd like to know what it does not say. It does not say after shower and shave, 2 over easy and bacon, a half a pot of coffee, reading the front page, and a fight with her. It's not what it says. It says on awakening. I have a disease so powerful it kills people that don't even have it. And I need to take my medicine right away. An old friend of mine says his disease gets up 20 minutes before he does every morning, does some jumping jacks and some push-ups, and it perches on the headboard at weights. And when he opens his eyes, roar, it jumps on him. I need my medicine right now, on awakening. That's what it says. I think that's what it means. This is about inviting God in to be God and me volunteering for service. I have not surrendered in a very long time. Surrender is after a fight. This morning I did not surrender. I volunteered. I'm not a conscript here. I wasn't drafted. I'm a volunteer. And I volunteered for service this morning. I feel great about it. We know we've missed an awful lot. We didn't come here to give it all to you. We came here for those who have not done all the step work to maybe give you a hunger for it and maybe take some of the fear away from the frightening steps. I hope we've done that. And we'll see you again about 1/2 past on this clock up here. And don't get between me and the men's room.